Glad you're back on with us.
Yeah, good to be here today.
So as I was saying, we have Military Caregiver Month, which most people don't realize is a thing. But it is something that's important. We have an aging population, especially in our veteran community. What can you tell us about what this month means to you?
Well, the month of the military caregiver, personally is very, very important to me. I became an advocate for caregivers, military and caregivers, after caring for my mom, who had inoperable lung cancer, and caring for my brother. But for caregivers don't think about being heroes, right? We don't think about it. We don't see it in that terminology. But military caregivers start coming about. It was probably about the terminology military caregivers and our hidden heroes around 2011, when former Senator Elizabeth Dole, when her husband was in Walter Reed, and he was in there for like 11 months, and she was walking around or talking to the different caregivers there whose spouses had been injured, and they were there, and she found out, she just started hearing their stories and start learning about, they're doing a lot, and they're under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of pressure. And so that's kind of when it became popular to hear the words caregiver or military caregiver, because, we are people. We just do what we're supposed to do for our family members, and a lot of that is including care,
I think that's really, really poignant, really, really respectable, the fact that you are taking that responsibility, because I've talked to a lot of people, and it's surprising, but people don't realize that there are a lot of families that don't have that person that's strong enough to take on that responsibility. It's a big responsibility. It often requires a lot of sacrifice. What can you tell us about that sacrifice, and also personally what that meant to you?
Well, it is a great sacrifice, but when you're doing it and when you're caring for someone, you don't see it, especially your loved one, like me caring for my mom. I didn't see it so much as a sacrifice. I saw it as an honor, because my mother took care of me, and spouses a lot of times, they don't see it as a sacrifice. It's just what you do. But then, or even children, when you think about there's 5.5 million caregivers, but in that populace, there's also children that are helping mom or dad, whether it's with their medications, maybe getting their prosthetic. I mean, there's just so many different things that children are doing as well to help to make that family a whole unit as much as they can, because their normal is no longer a normal,
Mm-hmm. So what are the resources that are out there available to veterans? So just give people some background. I looked at the National Council on Aging, their website, and it has some information on there that mentions that, like I mentioned before, veterans are getting older, but most of the veteran population, people don't realize, are seniors. More than half of the veteran population are seniors. And veterans are more likely to need care than the civilian population. And reliance on VA benefits is key. So what resources can we get access to as veterans?
Well, let me, before I mention to some of the resources, let me mention, there's kind of like they say, there's like the pre-9/11 and the post-9/11 caregivers. And so those pre-9/11 caregivers are those from, World War I, the Korean conflict, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, where they kind of lump them up in that one. But in particular, like Vietnam and World War II, you see them more as the aging caregiver. So it's a person that's potentially caring for their parent, right, or an older person caring for their spouse because of those aging things, and helping them and making sure that their Social Security or their disability or all of those things are lined up. Well, the post 9/11, those are going to be your younger ones, those are that have deployed after 9/11, those that have been, even some of those that have come back from Afghanistan, even most recently, those are the ones that are categorized with more of the TBI, traumatic brain injuries, more of the post-stress disorders, those different things like that. And so you kind of have them categorized in two different areas. So the resources for one may not necessarily be the resources that are most helpful for the other. So for the pre-9/11, one of the resources that I always tell people about is your local area agency on aging. And I know I didn't say VA, and I'll get to that, but they are targeted in your local area to help those that are aging. About probably was last year. I had someone on the show, and she was talking about her mother who had dementia. Well, when her mother first was diagnosed with early dementia, she didn't think about it because she was financially in a place that she was able to take care of her mother. So she didn't sign up for the local resources that were available or the local through the local area agency on aging. And so she waited about 3 years later, and she went from being not signing up to like number 23,000 something on the list.
You said from not signing up to 23,000?
In 3 years.
Wow.
And even after that, she was on the wait list, and it took her another 8 years before she got to the top of the list.
Wow.
And so when you're thinking about those those older ones, you definitely want to look for those type of resources that are out there that are available. There's resources that are available on almost like we could say like at the federal level, then you got them at the state level, or I should say the national level. You got them at the state level, and then you have them at the local level. So those are kind of things you want to look for, those that are in the older areas. Of course, you want to look into like Medicaid and Medicare, and definitely the VA. The VA has several different programs for those that are ages, like the age-blind and disabled. But sometimes there's a lot of research that you have to do, and then you may be in a community where you don't have a VA, right, or you don't have military doctors that can assist you in those particular areas. Now, the post 9/11, those are the ones, again, they're going to the VA. They're looking for those different type of things more. Some of them are, with the traumatic brain and some of the others, they're looking for different type of specialists, to help us with those type of challenges that we're having. So those are the things that the person is doing, or the military person is doing. But then you have to think about what is happening for the caregiver, right? So it's a lot. It can be a lot.
Mm-hmm. So now, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead.
I was saying because there's different things you can get through the national and the state level and the local level, and particularly with your local Department of Aging in your community. But then there's veteran service organizations. It seems like they've been taking on the big burden of stepping forward to fill in the gaps where the VA can't help.
Yeah. So collectively, these are just, the Fisher House, these are like some that are still like active duty, or those that are, the Fisher House is a great organization. The Fisher House is considered like the home away from home for military families. It allows them to stay there free of charge while their loved one is being seen at a military or VA hospital.
Wow.
You have, of course, the VA. The VA has programs for caregivers to help. It has a hotline. They have a respite program. Then there's funding. There's educational programs that you can tap into the VA. AARP is definitely a great resource. Just last week I gave a presentation about some of the AARP caregiver resources, and the organization that I gave the presentation to, they said they had no idea that AARP was doing that much in the veteran space in the community. There's a lot. There's the Rosalind Carter Institute, Operation Family Caregiver. There's just so many. But what you have to do is you have to do a lot of research, because a lot of times as a caregiver, there's a lot of resources that are out there, but you have an immediate need right now, right? And so you may not have time to do a lot of research, or you may not even know where to start.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do? Where do you start?
Well, the key is, if there's an opportunity, one of the reasons why I love having the show and to be able to bring the topics and the different people onto the show is because one of the things that you want to do is just like in the military, right? You go to basic training, you go to boot camp first, even before you ever do so many other things. And so trying to help people to get in that mindset of saying, I may not be in a situation now, but tomorrow, so what can I do now? You start learning about different resources. You learn about different programs, like I was saying, a local area agency on aging, or you learn about the VA, and you just talk about those different things, right?
So I think it's a good point. Thinking about the need before it becomes a need, thinking about what you might need to do in the future, basically preparing yourself, being prepared and ready, for that situation. We don't train you don't start training the day you get invaded. You start training years and years and months ahead of time. So when that invasion comes, you're ready to go. That's what they did in Ukraine. So
there is a lot of times when you become a caregiver, it's not something that you gradually get the opportunity to move into. It could be whether it's a military accident, something like happen. I've had someone on the show, Jessica. She was on the show and she was talking about her husband. He stepped on an explosive device, right? And so she said, when we were talking to her, she was already prepared for her husband to come home whole. And she said she hated to say it, or come home in a box. But she was never prepared for her husband to come home with all of the challenges that he had to go through. So now your mindset has to shift from a 20-something-year-old or a 30-something-year-old where you're planning to start a family. And now here you are, like for Jessica, going back and forth through where she was living to Walter Reed for months at a time, and then getting off the plane, going picking up your children. So there's all of these different situations that you're thrust into, and you just have to be ready to be resilient and flexible to be able to manage through every situation.
Right, and to add to that, I think it's really important too as veterans. We need to also think about our own care and thinking about what's going to happen to us and what kind of burden will we place on our families if the time comes where we start to deteriorate, whether it's because of injury or something we brought back from the war or, whatever it might be. I mean, that's something really all Americans should have some type of health care plan, a long-term care plan to make sure that if they're in a situation where they have to go into a nursing home or have someone come into the house to take care of them, or at least somebody that's going to drive point to make sure that you're being taken care of 24/7 if you can't take care of yourself.
I was listening to a webinar a while ago, and it was a spouse of a military veteran, and she was talking about, she when her husband came home after being deployed, there were no external factors to know that anything was wrong. But she said after time, she started noticing a decline in different things, and the children even started noticing. And she mentioned specifically one time when they had gone to Costco to get pizza for dinner, I believe, or something like that. And she mentioned that there was a lady in there. They were standing in line waiting for their pizza, and there was a lady in there, and I guess she wanted to kind of rush through the line to hurry up and get her pizza. And so she said all of a sudden her husband just reacted, and she said it was not good. And she said she knew the situation was not going to be any better. And she said she realized that she couldn't calm him, and their children were kind of on the side, like hysterical, frightened. And so I guess he was arguing with the lady, and so I guess the husband came with his shopping cart and his son, and so they started kind of arguing back and forth. And so she said she tried to deflect it by telling this man, please, my husband is a veteran. That didn't work. He said, I could care less about your husband being a veteran. And then she said, well, he has PTSD. And when he said that able to kind of help him to back off. But then her husband told her, they were having a conversation one day, and he told her, he said not only had he been suicidal, he was homicidal. To the point where, because of everything that he had been dealing with in his mind, where he wanted to not only take his own life, but he even wanted to take his boss's life. And so, yes, it's so important as the caregiver to make sure that you're getting the resources that you need, but it's also, like you said, making sure that military person is being taken care of, getting the resources that they need, getting the help, speaking up, letting people know that you're not okay. Because a lot of times we don't want to do that because in the military we're okay, or we almost like have to be okay. So, yeah.
That's a really training of the brain to really get to the point where you realize the reality of it is, and even in the military, we don't win any wars on our own. Everybody has to fight in a unit. That's why they call us units. And all the units work together. So it's like when you come back from being from service, you have to understand that you have to be in a position where you can not self-diagnose is the wrong word, but to basically recognize that you need some help. Recognize that you're doing something wrong that did require some expert intervention.
Definitely. I mean, that's the best way to do is to realize, like you said, we can't go through this alone. But think about it, Sean, we're talking about caregivers from an adult perspective, but remember, there are also children caregivers, right? So there's the children in that home that's experiencing that. There's the children that are really helping, trying to help the mom or trying to help their dad, or they're trying to go to school and get educated, or they may not be able to go to basketball practice or football practice. So it really is the nucleus of the family has to deal with this challenge that the family has. You know, and those, again, I was saying earlier, when a post 9/11, those may be like a 20-year-old family or 30-year-old family. And you're, in your mind, I'm not thinking that you're thinking at 20 years or 30 years old, you're looking for the next 20, 30 years of your life. It's going to be in this space of this challenge, you know?
Right, you're not thinking about the challenge until it actually hits you. And when I joined the military, one of the things I said I would not do, just because I didn't know if one day I might have to go to war, or go to overseas, or be deployed. And I'd already, experienced from previous generations, the idea of, a parent or someone being deployed and not necessarily coming back, or coming back different, whether they're injured or permanently disabled. So I said I'm never going to get married in this situation. If I'm in the military and I'm starting out and I'm young, I'm 18, I'm 18, 19 years old, I'm not getting married until I come back.
Yeah.
That was my idea. But we have to think. But of course, it's not. I mean, that was my situation. Not everybody can really do that. That's not normal for everybody. I ended up going to the military, meeting somebody in the military. I almost got married in the military. However, the thing of it is, like I said, we have to get to that point where we realize that life continues, and what if scenarios in life we have to just be prepared for. Just like we prepare for battle and prepare for everything else, you're going to have to prepare for these types of what if scenarios that we hope we never get into.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's preparing for your trust, your will, putting these different places, powers of attorney, talking about these different things. What are your preferences in death, in terms of your funeral, your religious beliefs? A lot of these things that we just don't talk about, and it's all about being prepared, but it's also helping that caregiver, because if you're on medication, of course, they need to know what type of medication you're taking. But sometimes as an individual, you don't want to share those things, but you have to, in order for you to get the help that you need, or even in order for the caregiver to get the help that they need, because caregivers, there's a good percentage of caregivers that are very depressed. Yeah. Because now they have all of these other things that are going on, so they don't get a chance, an opportunity to really tend to themselves and to their own needs.
I think there's a wise man that said that the depression was contagious.
Yeah. It really is. I want to mention something too, because we're almost out of time. Next month, I definitely want to mention this. I'm going to have someone come on to talk about scams, and it indirectly but directly ties to what we're talking about today, because there's a lot of scams that are going out there to targeting military, to veterans, to military caregivers, whether it's because you're trying to get your VA claims done, or they're telling you need to pay for medical records, for copies of your medical records and different things like that. So I want to be able to talk about that next month in June, because it definitely ties into some of the stuff that we're talking about now, and just helping in that preparedness and everything that we need to do as the individual, whether it's from the military side or from the caregiver side.
Keisha L. Jackson, U.S. Air Force veteran and family caregiver, appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you, Sean. Thanks. It's always great to hear your voice.
Yours too. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.